Okay, we're off on a visit to yet another section of the Roman River. I've not fished it before, but we walked it a few years ago in lockdown and it looked fishable then. It's always possible we'll arrive there and find it utterly overgrown, but we'll see. So on the Yomp we have an interesting philosophical stroke scientific matter to ponder. A friend recently posted a Facebook post about the Voyager spacecraft, which contains some artifacts that are intended to demonstrate our sentience should any other sentient being find these artifacts. Amongst the artifacts is a recording of Chuck Berry's guitar intro to Johnny Be Good. And my friend's assertion was that in her view Tori Amos's sung version of John Lennon's Imagine would be what she would rather present to any sentient beings that happen to be out there. My view is that I think the instrumental piece would be more appropriate, and we'll get on to why in a minute, but that perhaps some different pieces of music would have been more appropriate. Maybe Beethoven's Fifth, or the last movement of Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 6, or Bruce Hornsby's piano solo on You Can't Make Me Love You by Bonnie Raitt, or indeed Claudio Abbadio's version of the Moonlight Sonata. But it brings up an interesting question, which is this: there's a basic assumption that all sentient beings have an auditory system and would be able to find a way of converting the artifacts into audio. This is not necessarily going to be the case. It is not necessarily the case that all sentient beings have a functioning auditory system. However, it does seem to me that the one thing that unites all sentient beings in the cosmos is the study of the organization and the analysis of vibrations, because there is a scientific consensus that all matter in the universe, even the matter that we only suspect and have not yet been able to analyze, although we can detect its presence and its influence, but all matter is composed of, or let's be more accurate, is describable as a form of vibration. And thus, to present, let's call them aliens, but in a non-pejorative sense, let's call them aliens, in order to present evidence of our sentience to aliens by presenting them with some sophisticated form of vibration, we stand more chance of them being able to analyze it and make some kind of sense of it than we do of anything that contains spoken word and or sung language, because you've got the additional barrier of the language to get through. And it would be my contention that all sentient beings will at some point early on in their development of scientific practice will begin to observe and study vibrations, even if it's on a very primitive level, of the periodicity of their planet's movements around the sun around its sun, or indeed the periodicity of the movements of heavenly bodies. There's a theory. Please go ahead and shoot holes in it. There's a sort of light drizzle. Today may be the day that I experiment for the first time and put my GoPro underwater. It is sold on the theory that it is waterproof, but we'll find out. And I have with me my little 6-foot rod, fly rod, my usual collection of flies. Today I might try what I believe is known in the fly fishing community as nymphing. I might even put on a strike indicator, which purists would regard as an abomination because it's like having a float. I might also try what's known as the dry dropper technique, which basically means you have a dry fly that floats on the surface, and suspended below it at a depth that is determined by the depth of the water you're fishing in, you have a nymph, or a little weighted nymph that will sink to the bottom. The problem with that on these little rivers is that there is no such thing as a constant depth. It changes from yard to yard, and you can have little riffles and runs of a few inches deep that then run into pools of 2 feet deep. So the indicator method gives me the best option of being able to change depth as I go along, because you just slide the indicator up and down the line. So you can see Roger Cook's dictum of "you must have a theory when you go fishing, Jay." I'm holding to. But this is a lovely walk anyway. I believe this is the conservation area. The bluebells are glorious. Nature seems a little unsure of whether or not it's actually spring yet, because it's so cold. It's about 7 degrees today, and this is what, 23rd, 24th of April. Right, now as I recall, the river is down at the bottom of this little run here, so I'll turn the camera off while I'm tackling up, showing a bit of the stretch when we get to it, and then we'll try a spot of fishing. Okay, it is, as we've come to expect with the Roman River, totally inaccessible, though my continued improvement with the bow and arrow cast should serve me well here. I haven't got any waders with me, and I don't think I'll need them, because I think this footpath runs along the bank of the way. But we shall see. There's a likely spot. We might approach that from the other end. So come upstream at it. There's a wee bridge here. Sadly, that doesn't look particularly accessible, but let's poke around the corner and find out. Okay, this looks like it might be an option. Well, I'm going to tackle up. Okay, I've packed up my rod. I'm going home. I've once again drawn a complete blank. I'm going to walk back down the stretch that I've fished, and anybody that wants to offer me advice or criticism or suggestions on what I could do different, believe me, you're pushing at an open door. In each of these swims I've tried a streamer, a nymph and a dry fly with a nymph suspended below it. I've had absolutely nothing. This was the last one I fished. The previous one is round here. You can see the challenge, or one of the challenges, very overgrown, and all these nettles, you never know when you're going to come across a sunken log that will put your footing off. I've dropped a streamer and a nymph and a dry fly into there. I've got a nymph into the tail of that little run there and let it run down as close under the bank as I could get it. I've approached with stealth at all times. I've fished 3 different spots on both sides of the bank of this swim. There's a wire fence running through here that I've got to be very aware of. I have trotted a dry dropper with a nymph on the bottom and a streamer under this log, and I did it from by hiding behind the log on the other side so I wasn't visible. In terms of dry, I've not seen any insects hatching at all. There's nothing going on. I've run a nymph and a streamer down that stretch. Not even a touch. Streamers, I used a white, I think it's called a cat's whisker. It's a white one and a dark green one with a bit of sparkle at its throat, both of which look quite tempting even to me, actually. So I'm actually going to subtitle this video Roman River 3 brackets the world's worst fishermen, close brackets. I am absolutely bemused as to why I cannot catch anything in this river. I know they're there, I can see them every time I come here. And I've been working on my stealthy approach. I've got my bow and arrow cast to the point where I can cast a reasonable distance, but this is what we're up against as well. I fished a couple of pools down that way too, with precisely the same outcome. Absolutely bugger all. I fished the tail of that little run there, crouched down here. It's so frustrating. This I've fished from both sides. I would have thought it was a pretty obvious place under there, but I've run, as I say, a streamer, a dry dropper and a nymph on its own to no avail. And it's, well, must be 1:45 and I'm hungry. In fact, I'm hangry. So, back to the car. But I will crack this, I will do it, I'm determined. And it might take me the rest of the year, but I will catch a fish. I will catch a trout on this river, on a fly, without any assistance from anybody else, however kindly the offers may be. But in terms of accepting advice, bring it on. I'm ready for all the suggestions that anyone can offer. So I'll take comfort in the bluebells on the way home. It's really spring now, even though it's cold. The trees have decided it's time to come out. Look at this. All sorts of lovely things. Foxgloves, you name it, all coming out. There's some evidence that some degree of maintenance takes place on this bit of the land. There is a sign marking it as a conservation area when you come onto it. And I've seen white-tailed rabbits, small deer, I've heard pheasants, woodpeckers, all sorts of things. Now, it's a lovely piece of land and we will be back. There's a kind of optimum time of year because in about 3 weeks' time those stinging nettles will be at eye height, and they'll remain that way until the autumn and the trout season closes. Boo-hoo. So this time of year and the weeks leading up to now are ideal for fishing it because you can still get through the nettles. All this fresh young hazels, it looks like. So there's been some coppicing. When we were here a few years ago during lockdown, there was some serious logging going on in the field we're about to come into. That's a strange thing, look. This branch of this oak tree has gone straight through this holly tree. Quite remarkable. Look at that. In trees, as in so much of life, the crotches are the most interesting bits. And if I could get that crotch on my wood lathe, there'd be a fine bowl to be turned out of that. So, home again, home again. This is a bridle path, as you can tell by the horseshoe prints as we go along it. I'm glad I've got my new Timberland boots on. They're very sturdy. Took a while to break in because the leather around the ankles was very stiff and it really hurt to walk in. But I've persevered and they're now very comfortable. Got good tread on them, and I know from buying timberlands in the past, no I don't have a product placement deal, that they are worth the money because they last forever. I actually bought them when I was on tour, sight unseen, and an email came in saying special offer, you know, sale 50% off. This was a £200 pair of boots that I got for 100 quid. Hurrah! Okay, yeah, so this field was a forest. Well, not so much a forest, it was like a plantation. The trees were all in orderly rows and it was all very neat and tidy. But the decision had been taken to clear it. And I love this bit at the bottom. They've left this bit with these beautiful bulrushes. And there's a little stream running along there, but I don't think it's big enough to dip a rod in. Let's go and have a look. Look at these horsetail rushes here. And it's quite wet, this. I've been here before, but it was really boggy. But we have a pair of trusty timberlands on our feet. What could possibly go more wrong than it already did? Yeah. Probably home to lampreys and gudgeons. And even if there are trout in there, it's even more unfishable than the river we've just come from. I believe the phrase of the day is rewilding, although I wouldn't call planting trees in serried ranks like that exactly wild. There'll be something in there, but it's pretty much impossible to get to. Again, comment below if you think different and would have a strategy for proving it, and I will attempt to prove it on your behalf. It's quite clean. Gravelly bottomed, reasonably fast. I was just considering some kind of a gag. There we go, it's a big pheasant, partridge, whatever. About being gravelly bottomed and fast myself, but it's inappropriate for public view, I think. Okay. These bramble banks building up amongst the trees here. It's going to be blackberry heaven in the autumn. Ah, lovely. I do enjoy these trips even if I'm not catching any fish. It's very good exercise and I'm out in nature. And after a working lifetime that's taken place mostly in air-conditioned studios with limited daylight, or city centres in 5-star hotels big venues, I've come to appreciate being in the countryside more and more. I grew up in this kind of countryside. And it's beautiful. Got my snuffle back. I think it's the rapeseed that grows at this time of year. There's hay fever coming on. Purity when I get back home. There we are. Nearly at the path. Back up through the woods. Yeah, you can see the remains of where the tracks of where the logging vehicles were in here a few years ago. They chewed it up good and proper, but as ever, nature has reasserted itself, reclaimed its own. These big ruts from the logging tractors and what have you. I don't know if they'll ever be erased. Look at the haze of bluebells up the hill. Everything new and fresh and green. What are they? I think these are called speedwells. These little blue fellas, I think. Or forget-me-nots. I forget. Me not. Oh. And the ubiquitous stinging nettle. And some beautiful old trees. Look at this. That's the tree where we started the video, but I'll leave the camera on, get back to the car. While I continue to ponder my inability to get fish out of that river. I have had a couple out of there a few years ago, but it was free lining worms. And it's currently the river closed season, so if you're found with worms, which are bait for other fish as well as trout, perch, chub, also pretty much everything take a worm, you're in trouble. Whereas if you've just got fly equipment and no other bait, you're okay. But I have had trout on worm out of the Roman River on 2 occasions, so I know they're there and I keep seeing them whenever I come fishing, which just adds to the pain, really. This house here must be strange living out there. We're what, a quarter of a mile from the road, and the road itself is a back road, not really any houses on it. Oh, take my hat off. God. Looking at the bark and the leaves, I think these are all wild cherry trees. Again, anyone that knows better than me, and there will be a lot of people that do, your comments are most welcome to continue my education. The usual conifers that have crowded out the indigenous species of tree. There's a squirrel ahead on the path. I'm a very childish fan of wordplay and punctuation play. As in, what's that? A head in the road? I'm in, love. Go and help your Uncle Jack off the horse. All that kind of thing. The closest thing I have to a Bible is a book by a lady called Lynn something, called Eats, Shoots, and Leaves, which is a book about punctuation and grammar and why it matters. And that comes from the example, the panda is an animal that eats shoots and leaves, but if you put commas after eats and shoots, it completely changes the sense of the sentence. I also wage a fierce but futile war against people that say should have, could have, I would have, because it simply makes no sense. These things matter to me, probably to nobody else, but there we go. What's that? Is that a dog? Maybe it was a little bound grizzly baby bear. That would be fun, wouldn't it? We met one once in a forest in Canada. It was a black bear. We got out of there quickly, singing loudly, which is what you're supposed to do. Vin chose to sing It's a Long Way to Tipperary. I never quite understood why. There goes the car up there. We're done. Thank you for joining me and staying with me, those that did. Bye bye everybody, bye bye.